30,000 feet above the Atlantic, in the first-class cabin where silence was purchased at a premium, Alexander Blackstone reclined in his seat with the quiet arrogance of a man who had never heard the word no. At 29, devastatingly handsome and heir to a $50 million empire, he carried himself like the world was a stage built for his amusement. The flight attendants smiled too wide, the passengers avoided his eyes, and Alexander liked it that way. Power, after all, was only real when others felt small around you. He adjusted his cufflinks, bored, his reflection in the window staring back with the same cold precision that had made him rich and kept him utterly alone. "People are predictable," he murmured to Derek Morrison, his closest friend since prep school, who sat beside him nursing a glass of Dom Perignon. "They'll do anything for money or a name." Derek smirked. "And if they don't?" Alexander's jaw tightened, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Then they're irrelevant." That was Alexander Blackstone. Charming, ruthless, untouchable, or so he believed, because that night, when the plane landed and the champagne stopped flowing, he would meet someone who didn't care about his last name, a woman in a simple black server's uniform, a woman he would use for a cruel game, one that would cost him everything. Before we go further into this story, one that will challenge everything you believe about love, power, and redemption, I need you to stay until the very end, because what starts as arrogance will turn into something none of them expected. If you believe people can change, if you've ever wondered whether love is stronger than pride, hit that like button and subscribe. This story deserves to be felt, not just heard. 4 weeks earlier, the Blackstone mansion rose like a monument to inherited wealth, its crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across marble floors that had been walked by 4 generations of American aristocracy. Tonight, the elite gathered, oil tycoons, tech moguls, old money families whose names opened doors that money alone could not. Alexander descended the grand staircase with practiced grace, adjusting his Armani tie, surveying his kingdom. At 29, he possessed everything. Devastating looks inherited from his mother's side, a vice presidency at Blackstone Industries earned through his surname, and the absolute certainty that came from never being told no. "Alex," Derek's voice cut through the symphony of privilege. "Get down here, we've got a proposition." Alexander found his friend surrounded by the usual suspects: Marcus Wellington III, heir to a shipping fortune; James Ashford, whose family owned half of Manhattan's real estate; Christopher Hayes, whose tech startup had made him a billionaire by 25. They were all watching something, or rather someone. A waitress moved through the crowd with surprising grace, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the designer gowns surrounding her. She carried a tray of champagne flutes, never stumbling, never imposing, yet somehow commanding attention through her very invisibility. Her name tag read, Sophia. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Marcus said, his voice dripping with something ugly. Alexander accepted a glass from a passing server, not Sophia, and studied his friends with growing unease. He knew that tone. It preceded trouble. "Here's the thing, Blackstone." Derek leaned closer, whiskey breath and malice. "Marcus thinks you've gone soft, says you talk big about being a rebel, but you've never actually done anything rebellious in your privileged life." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Marcus challenged. "You only date within our circle. You'll marry some heiress your father approves of. You're all talk, Alex. A trust fund baby playing at being dangerous." The other men laughed, not with him, at him, and Alexander felt his pride ignite like gasoline meeting flame. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Derek's smile turned vicious. Marry her, the waitress. Prove you're man enough to step outside your golden cage. Silence crashed over their small circle. You're insane, Alexander said, but his eyes had already drifted back to Sophia, who was refilling glasses near a marble column, completely unaware she was being discussed like a prize in a game. 50,000 says you won't do it, Marcus pressed. Real marriage. Live with her for at least a month. Show us you can handle the real world. The others joined in, their voices overlapping. Come on, Alexander, scared of a little waitress? Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe you're all talk. 50 million in the bank and he can't handle one poor girl. Alexander's hands curled into fists. His entire life had been about proving himself worthy of the Blackstone name, showing these very people that he deserved his place among them. The idea that they saw him as weak, sheltered, afraid, it was unbearable. 200,000, Alexander heard himself say. Each. And she has to actually fall for me. No hiring actresses. It has to be real for her. Derek's grin stretched wide. Deal. But remember, she has to believe it's real, Blackstone. You have to make her love you. They shook hands, sealing Alexander's fate with the casual cruelty of men who had never faced consequences for their actions. What none of them noticed, what their privilege and arrogance made them blind to, was that Sophia had paused near that marble column. Her trained ears had caught every word. Her face remained perfectly neutral, the mask of a professional server who had learned to be invisible. But her dark eyes flashed with something dangerous, something these foolish men should have feared, because Sophia Valdez was not actually a waitress at all. She was Sophia Rosenberg, 26-year-old CEO of Rosenberg International, a conglomerate worth over $8 billion. She had been working undercover for 3 months, investigating potential business partners, specifically observing the Blackstone family up close. As the heiress to one of the world's largest fortunes, Sophia had spent her life watching men like Alexander, privileged, entitled, believing the world existed for their entertainment, that people were toys to be played with and discarded. Tonight, she had witnessed the ultimate display of their cruelty. And Alexander Blackstone, handsome, arrogant, about to make the biggest mistake of his privileged life, had no idea that the game he thought he was playing had just been turned against him. Sophia set down her tray with deliberate calm, smoothed her simple uniform, and turned to face the man approaching her with his practiced charm and devastating smile, completely unaware that he was not the hunter. He was the prey. Alexander crossed the crowded ballroom with the confidence of a man who had never been rejected. His friends watched from across the room, drinks raised in mock salute, their laughter a soundtrack to his approaching humiliation, though he didn't know it yet. Sophia saw him coming. She had 30 seconds to decide, walk away from this cruel game, or turn it into the most devastating lesson these arrogant men would ever receive. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Mija, sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies is to let them think they've already won. Decision made. Excuse me. Alexander's voice was smooth, practiced, the verbal equivalent of his expensive cologne. I'm Alexander Blackstone. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Sophia looked up from the empty glasses she was collecting, meeting his gaze with those remarkably intelligent dark eyes. She let silence stretch between them, just long enough to make him uncertain, before speaking. Sophia Valdez. Her voice carried a slight accent that was completely manufactured, chosen specifically because men like Alexander found it exotic, intriguing. Is there something you need, Mr. Blackstone? The directness caught him off guard. Most women in his orbit melted under his attention, giggled, blushed, made themselves small and available. Sophia did none of those things. She simply waited. "I was wondering—" Alexander shifted his weight, and Sophia noted with satisfaction that he was actually nervous. "Would you like to have coffee sometime tomorrow, perhaps?" Behind him, Derek and the others were watching, phones out, already documenting this moment for their entertainment. Sophia studied Alexander for a long moment, really looked at him, past the expensive suit and practiced charm, searching for something worth saving beneath all that privilege and arrogance. She found it, buried deep, uncertainty, a desperate need to prove himself. The fear that maybe he wasn't actually special, that maybe his worth came entirely from the surname he'd been born with, almost human, almost redeemable, which would make destroying him so much more satisfying. "I work double shifts most days," Sophia said carefully, her tone suggesting struggle, hardship, the kind of noble poverty that men like Alexander romanticized. "But I suppose I could meet you tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock? Perfect." Alexander's smile was triumphant, a hunter who thought he'd just successfully baited his trap. "There's a cafe on 5th Street. "I know it." Sophia's interruption was gentle, but firm. "I'll meet you there." As she turned to continue her work, Alexander reached out, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the heat of his hand near her elbow. "Sophia." She paused, looked back. "Thank you," he said, and for just a moment his voice held something genuine beneath the performance. "For saying yes." Sophia smiled, small, mysterious, perfectly calibrated to make him wonder what she was thinking. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Blackstone." She walked away, leaving Alexander standing in the middle of the ballroom with a strange feeling in his chest that might have been anticipation or might have been dread. He couldn't tell which. From across the room, Derek raised his glass in salute. Marcus was already counting money in his head. The others were laughing, filming, treating the whole thing like the best entertainment money could buy. None of them saw Sophia slip out of the ballroom and into a private alcove where she pulled out her phone. Not the cheap model she carried as part of her disguise, but a sleek device that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Margaret?" Sophia spoke quietly into the phone, her accent completely gone, her voice now crisp and commanding. "I need a complete background check on Alexander Blackstone. Everything. Financial records, psychological profile, relationship history, weaknesses. I want to know every pressure point this man has." "Miss Rosenberg," her assistant's voice carried concern, "are you certain about this course of action? Getting personally involved seems—" "These men bet $200,000 that one of them could manipulate a poor waitress into falling in love," Sophia interrupted, her voice cold as winter. "They're treating human emotions like a game show. They need to understand that actions have consequences." "And what consequences did you have in mind?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, staring out at the glittering party, watching Alexander accept congratulations from his friends like he'd already won some grand prize. "I'm going to make him fall in love with me," Sophia said finally. "Really, truly, devastatingly in love. And then I'm going to show him exactly who he tried to make a fool of." She ended the call and returned to the party, slipping back into her role as easily as putting on a coat. For the rest of the evening, she was the perfect invisible server, efficient, unobtrusive, forgettable. But every time she passed Alexander, she felt his eyes following her. Good. Let him look. Let him want. Let him fall. And when he hit the ground, she would be there to watch him shatter. The next evening, the cafe on 5th Street existed in a different universe from the Blackstone mansion. Worn leather chairs, chipped coffee mugs, the smell of pastries that had been sitting out too long. College students hunched over laptops, elderly couples shared newspapers, working-class families counted change for their orders. Alexander arrived 15 minutes early, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his attempt at casual that still probably cost more than everything in the cafe combined. He felt profoundly out of place. At exactly 7 o'clock, punctual as Sophia's fictional grandmother had taught her, she walked through the door. Alexander's breath stopped. Without the server's uniform, Sophia was even more striking. A simple sundress that probably came from a department store, but fit her like it had been made specifically for her body. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. No makeup beyond what looked like a touch of lip gloss. She looked real, authentic, everything the women in his circle worked so hard to fake. "You're punctual," Alexander said, standing to pull out her chair, a gesture his mother had drilled into him since childhood. "I like that." Sophia accepted the seat with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My grandmother always said that being late shows disrespect for other people's time. Time is the only thing we all have equally, regardless of how much money we have." The observation landed between them like a stone in still water, creating ripples Alexander hadn't expected. "Your grandmother sounds wise," he said, and meant it. She was. Sophia's voice softened with what seemed like genuine emotion, and in truth, it was genuine, just not for the reasons Alexander thought. Sophia's real grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, and she had been wise, though she'd also been a self-made billionaire who taught Sophia that power without mercy was just cruelty. "She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Alexander felt something twist in his chest, sympathy, which he hadn't expected to feel for the woman he was supposed to be deceiving. That must have been incredibly difficult. "It taught me what matters," Sophia said, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him forget about the bet, the friends watching from afar via the location tracker Derek had joked about installing on his phone. "Love, loyalty, the way you treat people when no one's watching. The way you treat people when no one's watching." The words echoed in Alexander's mind, uncomfortable because he suddenly realized he'd never actually thought about that before. His entire life had been performance, acting the way his father expected, his friends expected, society expected. Who was he when no one was watching? He had no idea. "Tell me about your grandmother," Alexander said, pushing aside the uncomfortable self-reflection. "What did she teach you?" Sophia's smile turned genuine, or appeared to. "She taught me that dignity doesn't come from what you own, but from how you treat others. That real strength is protecting those who can't protect themselves. That love isn't something you take, it's something you earn through being worthy of it." Every word was carefully chosen, designed to make Alexander see her as noble, pure, everything his world lacked. It was working. "She sounds like she was an incredible woman," Alexander said quietly, and found himself reaching across the table to take Sophia's hand. "I'm sorry you lost her." Sophia let him hold her hand for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to create connection, not long enough to seem desperate. Then she pulled away gently, picking up her coffee cup. "Tell me about you, Alexander Blackstone." She said his name like she was tasting something foreign. "What's it like being born into all that wealth?" Alexander felt his chest puff slightly, an automatic response to recognition that he'd never questioned before. "You know who I am?" Everyone in this city knows the Blackstone name. Sophia's tone was neutral, but her eyes held something that might have been judgment. Your family's company has been around for generations, hasn't it? 4 generations, Alexander confirmed, falling into the familiar script of family pride. My great-great-grandfather started with a single textile mill during the Industrial Revolution. Now we have manufacturing operations across the country, real estate holdings, investment portfolios. We're worth about 50 million. 50 million? Sophia had to physically suppress her laugh. She had made 50 million in the time it took to fly from New York to Los Angeles last month, closing a deal while over Kansas. But she nodded, eyes wide, as if impressed. That's incredible. You must have so much responsibility. Alexander launched into his rehearsed speech about the burdens of wealth, the pressure of living up to the Blackstone legacy, his father's expectations. He talked and talked, the way men do when they think a woman is fascinated by their importance. Sophia listened, really listened, not to what he was saying, but to what he wasn't saying. Beneath all the bravado and inherited pride, Alexander was drowning, suffocating under expectations he'd never chosen, living a life someone else had designed, desperately trying to prove he was worth loving for reasons beyond his surname. He was, Sophia realized with uncomfortable clarity, exactly like her. The realization should have made her feel triumphant. Finding common ground was the fastest way to build false intimacy. Instead, it made her feel something dangerous. Sympathy. You know what I think? Sophia interrupted his monologue about quarterly earnings. Alexander stopped mid-sentence, surprised. Women in his world didn't interrupt. What? I think you're lonely. The words hit him like a physical blow. I'm not. I have plenty of friends, family, colleagues. I didn't say alone, Sophia corrected gently. I said lonely. There's a difference. Silence stretched between them. Alexander stared at this woman, this waitress who was supposed to be unsophisticated, simple, easy to manipulate, and felt like she had just reached into his chest and exposed his heart to daylight. How did you... He couldn't finish the question. Sophia's smile was sad and knowing. Because I understand what it's like to have people around you who only see what you can give them, not who you actually are. It was the most honest thing she'd said all evening, and the most dangerous. Because in that moment, Alexander Blackstone stopped seeing Sophia Valdez as a target in a bet. He started seeing her as a person. And Sophia Rosenberg, billionaire CEO, master manipulator, woman with a plan for perfect revenge, felt the first crack in her carefully constructed armor. Can I see you again? Alexander asked, his voice stripped of its earlier performance. Tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you tell me to stop. Sophia should have said no. Should have kept him at a distance, maintained control, executed her plan with cold precision. Instead, she heard herself say, yes. And in that yes, she sealed both their fates. Because love, real love, the kind that changes you, doesn't care about plans or revenge or who was supposed to be deceiving whom. It just happens, and neither of them saw it coming. 3 weeks later, Alexander would propose. Sophia would say yes, and everything would go exactly according to her plan. Except for one thing, her heart. 3 weeks of coffee dates had transformed into something neither of them expected. Alexander found himself canceling business meetings to see Sophia, ignoring his father's increasingly angry voicemails, lying awake at night replaying conversations, the way her laugh sounded when he said something genuinely funny instead of rehearsed. This wasn't supposed to feel real, but it did. "Come with me today," Sophia said on their 16th meeting, her voice carrying a nervousness Alexander had never heard before. "I want to show you something important." "Anything," Alexander replied without hesitation. Sophia's apartment building existed in a neighborhood Alexander had driven past but never actually seen. Peeling paint cracked sidewalks, children playing in streets where broken glass glittered like dangerous diamonds. His Mercedes looked obscene, parked among rusted sedans and bicycles held together with wire and hope. "This is where I live," Sophia said quietly, watching his face for judgment. Alexander saw her bracing for disgust, for the casual cruelty men like him usually displayed when confronted with poverty. Instead, he simply nodded. "Show me." The apartment was small, one bedroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people, furniture that had been repaired multiple times. But it was immaculately clean, and on every surface sat books: philosophy, poetry, business theory, languages. "You read all these?" Alexander picked up a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius. "Knowledge is the only wealth no one can take from you," Sophia said, quoting her grandmother. Actually quoting her real grandmother this time, words spoken in a mansion library worth more than this entire building. The irony tasted bitter. "Sophia," a small voice called from the bedroom. A girl emerged, maybe 8 years old. Dark curls, eyes too large for her thin face. She wore pajamas that had been carefully mended, carried a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Alexander's carefully constructed world tilted. "This is Maya," Sophia said softly, gathering the child into her arms with obvious love. "My neighbor's daughter. Her mother works night shifts at the hospital, so Maya stays with me." "Hi, Maya," Alexander said, kneeling to meet her eyes, something his father would have called undignified. Maya studied him with the suspicious wisdom of children who've learned adults can't always be trusted. "Are you Sophia's boyfriend?" she asked bluntly. Alexander looked at Sophia, whose expression was carefully neutral. "I'd like to be." "Sophia says people who really love you don't need fancy things," Maya continued, her child's logic cutting straight to truth. "She says love is when someone sees the parts of you that are broken and thinks they're beautiful anyway." The words landed in Alexander's chest like stones. When had anyone ever loved him like that? His father loved what Alexander could become. His friends loved what Alexander could provide. The women in his circle loved the Blackstone name and bank account. But who loved Alexander? Just Alexander, stripped of everything else. "Sophia's right," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. "That's exactly what love should be." Something shifted in Sophia's expression, vulnerability she hadn't meant to show, genuine emotion breaking through her careful performance. For 3 weeks, she had been playing a role, creating Sophia Valdez, the noble waitress with wisdom beyond her means. But watching Alexander kneel in her manufactured poverty, speaking to Maya with genuine kindness instead of condescension, she felt her armor crack wider. This wasn't the arrogant heir who'd agreed to a cruel bet. This was someone else, someone real, someone she might actually... No. Sophia crushed the thought before it could finish forming. "Maya, why don't you show Alexander your drawings while I make dinner?" Sophia suggested, her voice slightly unsteady. As Maya dragged Alexander to the tiny kitchen table, excitedly explaining her crayon masterpieces, Sophia stood at the stove, preparing pasta with hands that trembled. What was she doing? The plan had been simple. Make him fall in love, reveal her identity, watch him crumble under the weight of his own cruelty and arrogance. But plans required the target to remain a target. And Alexander Blackstone was becoming something far more dangerous. He was becoming human. "Sophia," Alexander's voice pulled her from dangerous thoughts. "This one's my favorite." He held up Maya's drawing, two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One figure wore a crown, the other wore a simple dress. "That's you and Sophia," Maya explained proudly, "because Sophia says everyone deserves to be treated like royalty, even if they're not rich." Alexander's eyes found Sophia's across the small apartment. "She's right," he said softly. "Everyone deserves that." They ate pasta at a table meant for two, squeezed together with Maya between them, and Alexander couldn't remember the last time a meal had felt this real. No 7-course service, no crystal and silver, no conversations about stock portfolios and social climbing. Just food, laughter, and the feeling of something that might be happiness. After Maya fell asleep on the couch, still clutching her one-eared rabbit, Alexander helped Sophia wash dishes in silence. Their hands touched in the soapy water, neither pulled away. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, "for being kind to her." "You thought I wouldn't be." Sophia's pause was answer enough. "Sophia, I know what you must think of me. Rich, spoiled, disconnected from real life. And you're right." Alexander set down the dish he was holding, turning to face her fully. "But being with you these past 3 weeks, you're showing me a different way to be. A better way." "Alexander?" "I'm falling in love with you," he interrupted, the confession tumbling out raw and unpolished. "Real love. The kind Maya talked about, the kind that sees broken things and finds them beautiful." Sophia's heart was a war zone. This was the moment she should pull back, maintain distance, remember that this man had agreed to marry her as entertainment for his cruel friends. But looking at his face, open, vulnerable, waiting for her to destroy him or save him, she couldn't remember why revenge had ever seemed more important than this feeling. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, and it was the truest lie she'd ever told, because she was falling, just not for the reasons he thought, not with the person he believed her to be. And when the truth came out, and it had to, this beautiful, fragile thing between them would shatter like Maya's drawings in a storm. But for now, in this small apartment that wasn't really hers, with a child who wasn't really her responsibility, pretending to be a woman who didn't really exist, for now she let Alexander Blackstone kiss her, and for now she kissed him back. Tomorrow consequences would come. Tomorrow plans would continue. Tomorrow someone's heart would break. But tonight, just tonight, they would believe in the beautiful lie they'd built together, even though both of them in different ways knew it couldn't last. And that's when everything changed. The proposal happened on a Tuesday, not at a 5-star restaurant or a scenic overlook, but in the same small cafe where they'd first talked, surrounded by college students and the smell of burnt coffee. Alexander dropped to one knee with a ring he'd chosen himself, elegant, timeless, affordable by his standards, but still more than Sophia's fictional salary could imagine. "Marry me," he said, his voice breaking with emotion that was devastatingly real. And Sophia, feeling her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, said yes. The cafe erupted in applause. Strangers filmed the moment on their phones, already uploading it to social media with hashtags about true love and fairy tales. None of them knew they were documenting the beginning of a disaster. 2 weeks later, The wedding was set for St. Mary's Community Church. Small, humble, perfect for the struggling waitress Sophia pretended to be. But reality was closing in like a fist. Sophia stood in her real office, the 57th floor of Rosenberg International Tower, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that didn't know she controlled a significant portion of it, staring at the evidence Margaret had compiled. "The bet is real, Miss Rosenberg," her assistant confirmed, sliding a folder across the glass desk. $200,000. The terms specifically state that Alexander must make you fall in love with him and go through with an actual marriage. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Bank transfers, text messages. Derek Morrison's cruel laughter captured in audio recordings. Think Blackstone can actually pull it off? Doesn't matter. Watching him try to live with some poor waitress will be entertainment enough. $200,000 to see Alexander slum it. Best money I've ever spent. She'd known about the bet from the beginning. That's why she'd started this whole charade. But hearing it again now, after 3 weeks of his hands in hers, his vulnerability, his transformation, felt like swallowing glass. "There's something else," Margaret said carefully. "Alexander has been changing. Our investigators report he's been liquidating personal assets. He donated $50,000 to the Children's Hospital, where Maya's mother supposedly works. He's been researching non-profit organizations, asking questions about wealth redistribution." Sophia looked up sharply. "What?" "He's trying to become the man he thinks you'd respect," Margaret continued. "Miss Rosenberg, I believe his feelings are genuine. The bet may have started this, but what he feels now doesn't matter." Sophia's voice was ice, even as her heart screamed otherwise. He still made the bet. He still saw a human being as entertainment. "And what are you doing?" Margaret asked quietly. The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. What was Sophia doing, using him, manipulating him, planning to destroy him on what should be the happiest day of his life, making him fall in love so the betrayal would cut deeper? She was doing exactly what she condemned him for. The realization should have stopped her. It didn't. "Prepare the wedding," Sophia said coldly, "and make sure Derek Morrison has a front row seat." The wedding day. Alexander stood at the altar in his simple black suit, hands trembling, heart full of something he'd never felt before. Peace. For the first time in his 29 years, he knew exactly who he was and what he wanted. He wanted Sophia. Not because of a bet. He'd forgotten about the money weeks ago, had already decided to donate his winnings to charity. Not because of pride or proving anything to his friends. He wanted her because she'd shown him what it meant to be human. The chapel doors opened. Sophia walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, and Alexander felt tears stream down his face without shame. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. What he didn't see was the war raging behind her eyes, the way her heart was tearing itself apart with every step, the knowledge that she was about to destroy them both. "Dearly beloved," the elderly pastor began. Alexander took Sophia's hands, and she felt him trembling. With love. Real, genuine, devastating love. For a woman who didn't exist. "If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be wed," the pastor intoned, "speak now or forever, hold your peace." Silence. Then, "Actually," Derek Morrison's voice shattered the moment like a gunshot, "I think the bride should know something about her groom." Alexander turned, confusion and growing horror on his face. "Derek, don't—" "4 weeks ago," Derek continued, standing with theatrical flair, his phone held high, already streaming this to his social media followers, Alexander made a bet. $200,000. The terms? Marry a waitress. Prove he could handle the real world. You were entertainment, Sophia, a game. The chapel erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Sophia stood frozen, her rehearsed devastation replaced by something far more complicated. Because she'd known, she'd always known. But hearing it spoken aloud, seeing Alexander's face crumble, watching his desperate eyes search hers for understanding, it hurt more than she'd imagined possible. Sophia, Alexander pleaded, reaching for her. Please, yes, there was a bet, but I fell in love with you. Really, truly, how much? Sophia's voice cut through his desperation. What? How much money did you bet on marrying me? Alexander's face went pale. 200,000. But Sophia, $200,000. Sophia repeated the number slowly, tasting its weight. That's what my love was worth to you, what I was worth. She pulled off the engagement ring with deliberate calm, placed it on the altar between them. You want to know something, Alexander? Her voice was steady, cold, nothing like the woman he'd fallen in love with. You're right. There should be honesty between us. She reached into her bouquet, an odd place to keep anything, but Alexander was too distraught to notice and withdrew a business card, handed it to him. Alexander stared at the embossed lettering, Sophia Rosenberg, Chief Executive Officer, Rosenberg International. The world tilted. I heard your bet the night you made it, Sophia continued, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned chapel. Every word, every laugh. I watched you treat another human being's emotions like they were entertainment, so I decided to teach you a lesson. You, Alexander couldn't form words. You knew. I've known everything from the beginning. Sophia's smile was razor sharp. The struggling waitress, the sick grandmother, the humble apartment, all of it was a performance, Alexander. Just like your love. My love wasn't... Alexander's voice broke. Sophia, please, whatever else was lies. What I feel for you is real. You don't even know who I am. Sophia's control finally cracked, real pain flooding her voice. You fell in love with a character I created, a role I played. Sophia Valdez doesn't exist. Then show me who you really are. Alexander grabbed her hands desperately. Show me Sophia Rosenberg. Let me love the real you. No. Sophia pulled away, and the finality in her voice was absolute. You don't get to ask that. You lost that right when you made me a bet. She turned to the congregation, chin raised with dignity that made her seem almost regal despite the simple dress. Thank you all for coming, but there will be no wedding today. As Sophia walked back down the aisle, head high, spine straight, every inch the billionaire CEO, Alexander's voice shattered behind her. I love you, Sophia, please, I love you. But she didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around because if she looked back and saw the genuine devastation in his eyes, she might forgive him. And some lessons could only be learned through complete destruction. Outside, her Mercedes waited. Inside the chapel, Alexander Blackstone fell to his knees, destroyed. And neither of them realized that Derek Morrison, architect of all this pain, was smiling, because the real game was just beginning. 63 days. That's how long Alexander had been trying to reach Sophia. 63 days of unanswered calls, returned letters, security guards with instructions to remove him from Rosenberg International property. 63 days of watching his entire world collapse. The video of Derek's revelation had gone viral, millions of views, thousands of comments calling Alexander a monster, a sociopath, everything ugly that humanity could imagine. His father had disowned him. His friends had abandoned him, not because of morality, but because association with scandal damaged their reputations. The penthouse was gone, sold to pay debts and legal fees. Alexander now lived in a studio apartment in a neighborhood he would have been terrified of 3 months ago. He worked construction, the only company willing to hire someone with his reputation, and came home every night with hands blistered and a back that screamed. It was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because poverty, real poverty, the kind where you count change for groceries and pray your car starts, had stripped away everything false. And what remained was finally real. "You look terrible," said Father Michael, the priest who'd almost married them, as Alexander sat in the church basement attending a support group for men trying to become better. "I feel worse," Alexander admitted. "Good," Father Michael said without sympathy. "Guilt means you have a conscience. What matters is what you do with it." Alexander pulled out his phone. Not the latest model anymore, but something second-hand that made calls and nothing else, and showed the priest a document. "I've been investigating Derek Morrison," Alexander explained. "He didn't just orchestrate the bet, he's been manipulating both of us from the beginning." Father Michael's eyebrows rose. "Explain." Derek knew who Sophia really was. Alexander's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of a man who'd cried himself empty weeks ago. He recognized her that night at the party, set up the bet specifically because he knew she'd overhear it, knew she'd retaliate, knew it would eventually lead to viral scandal. Why would he want that? Because Derek's been shorting Rosenberg International stock for months, betting against Sophia's company. Every piece of negative publicity about her, the vindictive CEO, the emotionally unstable woman, it's all been planted by him. He's made millions off our pain. Father Michael was quiet for a long moment. "What will you do with this information?" "Give it to Sophia," Alexander said simply. "Warn her. Help her stop him before he destroys everything she's built." "And you expect nothing in return?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Father, I destroyed the woman I love, broke her trust in the cruelest way possible. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I can still protect her." "That's growth," Father Michael observed. "Real growth." "It's too late," Alexander said quietly. "Perhaps." The priest stood, placing a hand on Alexander's shoulder. "Or perhaps it's exactly the right time." Rosenberg International. Tue. Sophia hadn't slept properly in 63 days. Her company was under attack, stock prices fluctuating wildly. Rumors spreading through financial circles about instability, poor judgment, emotional leadership. She was being destroyed by the same weapon she'd tried to use against Alexander: public opinion. "Miss Rosenberg?" Margaret's voice was soft as she entered the darkened office where Sophia sat, surrounded by reports and empty coffee cups. "You should go home." "Can't." Sophia's voice was hoarse from disuse. "Have to find the leak. Someone's feeding confidential information to competitors." "Miss Rosenberg, when was the last time you ate?" Sophia couldn't remember. Margaret set down a sandwich, simple, from the cafe across the street, and Sophia stared at it like an accusation. 3 months ago, she would have eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants without thinking. But this sandwich, plain and humble, reminded her of meals with Alexander in that small cafe, when she'd been pretending to be poor, when he'd been falling in love with a lie, when everything had felt more real than anything in her actual life. "I miss him," Sophia whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep. Margaret sat down carefully. Then call him. I can't. He betrayed me, Margaret. Made me a bet. Treated my emotions like entertainment. And you did exactly the same thing to him, Margaret said gently. Miss Rosenberg, you knew about the bet from the beginning. You played a role specifically designed to manipulate his emotions. You made him fall in love so the betrayal would hurt more. How is what you did any different? The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. I was teaching him a lesson. Or you were seeking revenge. Margaret's tone wasn't accusatory, just honest. And in the process, you fell in love with the man you were trying to destroy, just like he fell in love with the woman he was supposed to be deceiving. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. What if he only loved Sophia Valdez? She finally asked, voice small. What if he can't love the real me? What if you never give him the chance to try? Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed. Security downstairs. Miss Rosenberg, Alexander Blackstone is in the lobby. He's insisting we give you this folder. Says it's urgent about Derek Morrison. Sophia's heart stopped. Send him up. Ma'am, your standing orders. Send him up. 5 minutes later, Alexander walked into her office. Sophia barely recognized him. Gone was the polished air in expensive suits. The man before her wore work boots and jeans stained with construction dust. His hands were calloused. His face was thinner, harder, carved by months of actual struggle. He looked real, beautiful in a way his privilege had hidden. Sophia, he breathed, and she heard everything in that one word. Longing, regret, love that hadn't died despite everything. Why are you here, Alexander? He set a folder on her desk. Derek's trying to destroy you. He's been manipulating us both from the beginning. It's all in there. The financial records, the planted stories, the coordinated attack on your stock price. Sophia opened the folder with trembling hands. Read evidence that confirmed what her own investigators had recently discovered. Derek Morrison had orchestrated everything. Why are you giving me this? She asked quietly. Because you deserve to know. Because Alexander's voice broke. Because I love you. Still. Always. And even if you never forgive me, even if you hate me for the rest of your life, I couldn't let him hurt you. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. I'm sorry, Alexander said finally. For the bet, for lying, for treating something sacred like it was a game. You were right to walk away. You deserved better than what I offered. And what are you offering now? Sophia asked, her voice barely audible. Alexander met her eyes. Nothing. I'm not offering anything, Sophia. I'm not here to make deals or ask for second chances. I just needed you to know the truth about Derek. And I needed you to know that what I felt, what I still feel, was never part of any game. He turned to leave. Alexander, wait. He stopped, his back to her, not daring to hope. I fell in love with you too, Sophia whispered. Really, truly. Somewhere between the lies and the revenge, I forgot it was supposed to be fake. Alexander turned slowly, his eyes bright with tears. I loved Sophia Valdez because she showed me kindness could exist without conditions, he said quietly. But I could love Sophia Rosenberg too, if she'd let me. If she'd trust me enough to show me who she really is. Sophia stood walking around her desk until she stood directly in front of him. I'm terrified, she admitted, of being hurt again, of trusting someone who already broke my heart. I know, Alexander said. I'm terrified too. Of not being enough, of disappointing you, of proving your worst assumptions about me were right all along. They stood inches apart, two people who'd destroyed each other, choosing whether to build something from the wreckage. "Help me stop Derek," Sophia said finally, "and then we'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that's enough. The war room Sophia assembled looked like something from a corporate thriller. 24 hours to stop Derek Morrison's coordinated attack. 24 hours to save Rosenberg International from a hostile takeover orchestrated by the man who'd turned their pain into profit. Alexander worked beside Sophia, their hands occasionally brushing over documents, each touch electric with possibility and fear. "Derek's planning to trigger the stock collapse tomorrow at market open," Sophia explained, pointing to financial models on multiple screens. "He's coordinated with 3 major investment firms. The moment our stock drops below a certain threshold, they'll initiate a hostile takeover bid." "Can we counter it?" Alexander asked. "Not with traditional methods. He's been too careful, too strategic." Sophia's jaw clenched. Unless what?" Sophia turned to face him fully. "Unless I go public. Tell the real story. Expose Derek's manipulation. But Alexander, that means revealing everything. The bet, my deception, the whole truth." "Do it," Alexander said without hesitation. "You understand what that means? Your reputation will be destroyed all over again. The media will crucify both of us." Alexander took her hands, calloused now from honest work, so different from the soft air who'd made that terrible bet months ago. "Sophia, I've spent 3 months learning that reputation built on lies isn't worth protecting. The only thing that matters is truth, and protecting the people you love." The word hung between them. Love. Neither had said it directly since the wedding disaster. "I have an idea," Alexander said suddenly, "but you have to trust me, completely." Sophia studied his face, the face she'd learned better than her own, even when she was lying about who she was. She saw determination, courage, and something deeper, genuine transformation. "What do you need?" The press conference, 6 a.m. Every major financial network was broadcasting live as Alexander Blackstone stepped up to the podium at Rosenberg International headquarters. Sophia watched from the wings, her heart in her throat. "My name is Alexander Blackstone," he began, his voice steady despite cameras from 50 outlets pointed at him. "3 months ago, I became infamous for one of the cruelest acts imaginable. Today, I want to tell you what really happened. All of it." The room was absolutely silent. "It's true that I agreed to a bet. Marry a waitress to prove I could handle the real world. It's true that I approached Sophia Valdez with dishonest intentions. But what the world doesn't know is that Derek Morrison orchestrated everything." Alexander presented evidence methodically, Derek recognizing Sophia Rosenberg at the party, setting up the bet knowing she'd overhear, planting the wedding revelation to go viral, short-selling Rosenberg stock for months while spreading rumors about Sophia's instability. Derek Morrison has made over $200 million betting against a company that employs 50,000 people, Alexander continued, his voice growing stronger. "He turned human emotions into a commodity, used our pain as a weapon for profit." Reporters shouted questions, but Alexander raised his hand for silence. "But I'm not here to blame Derek for everything. I made my own choices. I agreed to that bet. I treated another human being as entertainment, and I deserve every bit of hatred directed at me." He paused, his eyes finding Sophia in the wings. "What I don't deserve is Sophia Rosenberg's forgiveness. but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it anyway." Alexander pulled out a document, notarized, official, devastating. "This is the deed to what remains of my family's assets, properties, investments, everything I have left. I'm donating it all to the Sophia Rosenberg Foundation for Underprivileged Youth, a foundation I'm creating in honor of the woman who taught me that wealth means nothing if you're bankrupt of character." The room erupted. "Additionally," Alexander continued, "I'm offering testimony to federal investigators about Derek Morrison's financial manipulation. I'm cooperating fully with the SEC, and I'm making this promise publicly. Every penny I make for the rest of my life beyond what I need for basic survival will go to charities Sophia chooses." He stepped back from the podium, his part finished. Now it was Sophia's turn. She walked out to face the cameras, no longer pretending to be a humble waitress, but standing in her full power as one of the world's most influential CEOs. "My name is Sophia Rosenberg," she said clearly, "and Alexander just told you his truth. Now I'll tell you mine." The confession poured out. Her deception, her undercover investigation, her plan for revenge that had spiraled into something far more complicated. "I wanted to teach Alexander Blackstone a lesson about treating people as entertainment," Sophia admitted. "But in the process, I did exactly what I condemned him for. I manipulated his emotions, made him fall in love with a character designed to hurt him. I am as guilty as he is." She took a breath, steadying herself. "The difference is what we chose to do after. Alexander could have let Derek destroy me, could have gotten revenge. Instead, he spent 3 months in poverty, learning to be a better man. He gave up everything to warn me about Derek's attack. He's choosing truth over pride." Sophia's eyes found Alexander's across the room. "And I'm choosing forgiveness over revenge, because love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about two imperfect people choosing to grow together." The press conference dissolved into chaos, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, the internet exploding with reactions. But Sophia only saw Alexander. They met in the center of the room, surrounded by witnesses, and she took his hands. "I love you," she said clearly, loudly, for everyone to hear. "Not the version of you that agreed to a bet, not the heir with the trust fund. I love the man who lost everything and found himself, the man who chose my happiness over his revenge." "I love you too," Alexander replied, his voice breaking. "The real you, Sophia Rosenberg, brilliant and terrifying and capable of devastating cruelty and breathtaking mercy. All of it, all of you." Their kiss was captured by 50 cameras, broadcast to millions, turned into memes and headlines and inspiration. But they barely noticed, because they were finally, completely honest. And honesty, it turned out, was the foundation everything else could build on. 2 weeks later, Derek Morrison was arrested on 17 counts of securities fraud and market manipulation. Rosenberg International's stock recovered completely, then soared to record highs as investors recognized Sophia's brilliant leadership. Alexander started working at the company, not as an executive, but in the mailroom, determined to earn his place rather than have it given. And Sophia finally slept through the night. "Ready?" Alexander asked, extending his hand. They stood outside St. Mary's Community Church, the site of their disaster, now being transformed into something beautiful. "Ready," Sophia confirmed. This time, when they walked down that aisle, it would be as themselves. No lies, no games, no revenge. Just two broken people choosing to heal together. And that was more than enough. 1 year later, Rain fell softly on the city, not the violent storm of their first meeting, but gentle drops that washed everything clean. Sophia stood at the window of their apartment, watching dawn paint the skyline in shades of gold and rose. In her arms, their 3-month-old daughter slept peacefully. Tiny fingers curled against Sophia's chest. Isabella Rose Blackstone Rosenberg, named for the beauty they'd found in the wreckage. "Coffee." Alexander's voice was soft behind her, careful not to wake the baby. Sophia turned, smiling at the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, nothing designer, nothing meant to impress. His hands carried 2 mugs from the same cafe where they'd first talked, where lies had begun and truth had eventually won. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, accepting the cup. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city wake. So much had changed in 12 months. Alexander now ran the Sophia Rosenberg Foundation full-time, channeling his business acumen into helping underprivileged youth access education and opportunity. The foundation had already provided scholarships to 300 students, including Maya, the little girl from Sophia's fabricated apartment who was real after all, just not in the way Alexander had believed. Sophia had restructured Rosenberg International with a new focus: ethical business practices, employee welfare, using wealth as a tool for positive change rather than just profit. Derek Morrison was serving 7 years in federal prison, and the 2 people who'd started as enemies, then lovers, then enemies again, had finally found peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Alexander asked quietly. "Everything that happened?" Sophia considered the question carefully, watching Isabella's peaceful face. "I regret the pain," she said finally. "The cruelty we inflicted on each other. The time we wasted on revenge instead of honesty." "But," Alexander prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but I don't regret the journey." Sophia looked up at him, her dark eyes clear and honest. "Because it gave us this real love, hard-earned and honestly won." Alexander set down his coffee and wrapped his arms around both his girls, careful and reverent. "Father Michael is expecting us at 10, he reminded her. "For the actual wedding this time." Sophia laughed softly. "Think we'll make it through the vows without a scandal?" "Well, Derek's in prison, so our odds are better." They decided to marry again, properly this time, with no lies, no performances, no hidden agendas. Small ceremony, close friends, the people who'd stood by them through the disaster and helped them rebuild. "Sophia?" Alexander's voice turned serious. "I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. Old fear, old trauma, the memory of secrets that had destroyed them once before. "What is it?" "I'm terrified," Alexander admitted. "Every day I wake up afraid I'll disappoint you, that I'll prove I haven't really changed, that you'll realize you deserve better than a man who once treated love as a game." Sophia shifted Isabella to one arm and used the other to cup Alexander's face. "You want to know what I'm terrified of?" she asked gently. "Tell me." "That I'll become so focused on protecting what we have that I'll forget to let you be human. That I'll hold your past mistakes over you forever instead of letting us both grow." She smiled, tears gathering. "We're both terrified, Alexander. That's how we know it's real." He kissed her then, soft, sweet, tasting of coffee and promise, and the kind of love that survives fire. Isabella stirred, making small sounds of complaint at being squished between them. They laughed, pulling apart, and Alexander took his daughter carefully. "Hey, little one," he murmured. "Ready to watch your parents actually get married today?" Isabella yawned, unimpressed by adult drama. She has your attitude, Alexander observed. And your stubbornness, Sophia countered. They moved through the morning together, feeding Isabella, getting dressed, helping each other with buttons and ties the way partners do. Simple domesticity that was more meaningful than any grand gesture. At 9:30 they stood before the mirror together. Sophia wore a simple white dress, not designer, not discount, just beautiful. Alexander wore a suit he'd purchased with his own salary, earned through actual work rather than inheritance. They looked like themselves, finally completely themselves. "Ready?" Sophia asked. Alexander took her hand. "I've been ready since the moment you walked away from our first wedding. Took me this long to become the man who deserved to stand beside you." St. Mary's Community Church, 10 a.m. The same chapel where disaster had struck now held only love. Father Michael smiled as Alexander and Sophia stood before him. No tricks, no hidden agendas, just two people who'd chosen each other despite everything. "We're gathered here today," Father Michael began, "to witness something rare and beautiful. Not just a marriage, but a redemption. These two people have hurt each other, betrayed each other, and still chosen to forgive each other." The small congregation, Margaret Meyer and her mother, colleagues who'd become friends, people whose lives had been touched by their story, watched with tears and smiles. "Alexander, Sophia," Father Michael continued, "you've already lived through the worst part. You've survived deception, public humiliation, and your own capacity for cruelty. What you're promising today is that you'll also cherish the better." Their vows were simple, honest, stripped of performance. "I promise to love the real you," Alexander said, his voice steady. "Not who I want you to be, but who you actually are. I promise to earn your trust every single day. And I promise that when I fail, because I will fail, I'll own it immediately and work to be better." "I promise to see you as you are now," Sophia replied, "not as you were at your worst. I promise to believe in your capacity for growth. And I promise that when you stumble, because we both will, I'll help you stand back up." Simple promises, achievable promises, the kind that actually matter. When Father Michael pronounced them married, their kiss was witnessed by everyone who'd helped them survive. And it tasted like forgiveness, like second chances, like love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than steel. 5 years later, Alexander would publish a book about his journey from privilege to poverty to purpose. The proceeds would fund 1,000 more scholarships. 10 years later, Sophia would be named one of the most ethical CEOs in the world, proof that compassion and profit could coexist. 15 years later, Isabella would ask about how her parents met, and they would tell her the whole truth, the cruelty, the deception, the hard-won forgiveness. "So you both made terrible mistakes?" Isabella would ask. "Yes," they would admit. "But you chose to grow instead of give up." "Yes." "That's kind of beautiful," Isabella would decide, and she would be right. Because the most powerful love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two flawed people choosing each other, again and again, through mistakes and growth and the messy reality of being human. Alexander and Sophia's story started with the cruelest of games, but it became the most honest kind of love. And in the end, honesty was worth more than any fortune. If this story reminded you that everyone deserves a second chance, that love can survive even the deepest betrayals, and that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to change, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to grow together. What did you think? Have you ever had to choose between revenge and forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, the best love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about imperfect people choosing to become better together. Thank you for staying until the end.